It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I'm sitting here in the Furman Garner Performance Studio at KUAF. You guys know that we've partnered with KUAF, and it's been nothing short of amazing. I love some of the community relationships that have developed because of this podcast, and certainly the relationship that I Am Northwest Arkansas has with KUAF Radio is no exception to that. Kyle Kellums and Lee Wood and the rest of the team here at KUAF are simply amazing. And so today we're excited because we're sitting down with somebody that I've actually kind of been a fanboy of for quite some time and had a chance to certainly enjoy her food since the moment that I set foot in Northwest Arkansas more than 8 years ago. I was just telling her that. And so I finally got a chance to get Chef Maudie Schmitt on the podcast. Chef Maudie is the chef and owner of Cafe Rue Orleans, which is based right there, right just north of North Ave on College Avenue. You can't miss it. It's a very simple white building, but they sit up top there, kind of overlooking all of Northwest Arkansas, and they have a fabulous restaurant. And if you've only driven by and haven't been in, shame on you. And I'm going to encourage you to definitely check it out after you listen to this podcast. And you'll understand why. But without further ado, I want to welcome Chef Maudie Schmitt to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it is certainly my pleasure. And, as I did my research on you, and one of the things that I always tell people about this podcast is we like to have an organic conversation just to kind of learn about an individual. And I think people prefer something that's not highly scripted. But I would love for you in your own way to kind of share your superhero origin story. And I want to go back specifically to some of the family influence that you had in terms of how your family had a strong restaurant heritage in New Orleans, and that kind of shaped your culinary journey. I would love for you maybe to start there.
Sure. I have a great story. I'm the oldest of 6.
Okay.
My mom and dad were both from restaurant families in New Orleans, which means that you grew up above the restaurant and the bar like my mom did on Chapatula Street. Her daddy had a bar, sandwiches, lunch plate, and they lived upstairs. My dad, his parents did lots of different things through the years, but one of them was they had a little bar and sandwich shop on Magazine Street. And so from there, I think my parents instilled upon us the love of food and the love of cooking. Having said that, my mom was the youngest of 9, and her mom died at 9. So she had a housekeeper and 2 older sisters who really raised her. And so when she got married to my dad, she really didn't have any cooking skills. My dad was the oldest of 3, and he was pretty independent. And so just, that marriage, the youngest and the oldest, mom and dad marrying. My mom, she had this idea that she needed to cook for her family. And she was more casserole. Throw everything in a pot, put a cover on it, and you don't touch it. My dad was more adventurous, and so adventurous that he turned the garage into his kitchen with a refrigerator and a stove, and she wouldn't let him fry in the house. And so we would come home from school and we would pass the stove and we would look at what mom had, and then we would go outside and see what he was doing. And my dad worked for the railroad, so he had odd hours. Sometimes he would go to work when we were going to sleep, and then he would be there when we woke up. Sometimes he'd get in, 4 o'clock in the morning, he'd be sleeping. But he always had some food, and he was creative. My mom had to follow a recipe. And so, it's just kind of one of those things where I was brought up to participate, to peel potatoes, to learn how to shuck an oyster, learn how to peel shrimp, things like that. It was just one of those things with being, the oldest of 6. I did a lot of things in the kitchen. And so that kind of started the love of cooking and the appreciation of cooking.
Yeah.
Because I can give you a set of recipes and a set of ingredients and tell you to make a gumbo. But if you don't have the technique and you don't know how to stir that roux and keep it from burning, that flour and oil and that recipe is going to get you nowhere.
Yeah.
I tell people that a lot of times. I tell my cooks nowadays, it's not just about the ingredients in the recipe. It's about the technique and when you add something and when you know not to.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of how it started for me, the love of cooking.
Yeah.
And so because my mom grew up on Chapatula Street, when you walk in the restaurant, I have the window. We think it was the window in the room where she grew up. It's now a mirror. My brother saved all those windows when the building got sold a couple of decades ago to a family member. And that stays in the restaurant. And then I have catfish chapatulas as a dish on my menu to honor Chapatula Street.
Okay.
Nobody can pronounce it, but
yeah, exactly. I was about to try to pronounce it. Magazine's much easier though.
Yes,
so,
yes. And don't try to spell Chapatulas because it's an Indian word and it's crazy.
Yeah. So now Schmitt, that's a German last name.
German.
Isn't it?
So I'm German and Italian.
Okay.
And a lot of the good cooking comes from the Italian side.
Yeah.
And Italians settled in New Orleans. It was a port city.
Sure.
It is a port city.
Yeah.
And so, my roots are pretty deep in the Italian side. German side, maybe I got my, continence. I'm pretty strong-willed.
Right.
I think I got that from Germans because I don't know about their cooking.
Well, yeah, unless you want Spätzle or, some of that.
Right.
We have a couple of German restaurants, or at least German-influenced restaurants.
Yes.
Bauhaus Beer Garden is one that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
What the chef has done over there and Daniel Hentz, they've done a great job. But no, it's funny because, you expect that somebody's got a certain influence in their lives when they cook a certain type of food, right? But your exposure, you were just exposed to the culture in New Orleans. And I think the friends that I went to college with that were from New Orleans, they just kind of got it by proxy because they were in the area, and it's just something, it's hard to explain. And I shared with you that one of the things that I was excited about moving to Arkansas was that I was a little bit closer to New Orleans.
Sure.
Some of the best food I've ever eaten in my life was in New Orleans.
Yep.
And so I said, my rationale was, okay, I'm closer to New Orleans. I'm like an 8-hour, 9-hour drive to New Orleans. And I would hope that there's some New Orleans inspired food in Northwest Arkansas. And that first place that I said I went was to Cafe Rue Orleans. I think it was literally the first or second Sunday that we were in town. We came for brunch and I was sold. Cause anywhere that I could go to get beignets and some chicory, it was a wrap.
Any time of the day. We're open at 11. We close at 8 and you can come in and get beignets and Cafe du Monde coffee and chicory, and it doesn't have to be a special occasion.
Yeah. So, I think what's interesting when people see you and what you're doing today with Cafe Rue Orleans and the impact that you've had from a food perspective in our community here in Northwest Arkansas, I think a lot of people think you've been burning it up since day one, but you actually, cooking was a detour for you.
Yes.
You started first in education, which I found really interesting. Would you be able to kind of elaborate and tell us, what that experience was like before you actually got, you really licked your culinary chops and just threw yourself into that area?
It's an interesting journey, and I really wanted to be a teacher. And so when I graduated from high school in 1970, everybody was going to LSU. And I was like, I don't know, I want to be a teacher. And so, just opportunities presented themselves, and I found myself in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, going to Henderson State Teachers College.
Wow.
It's now a university, but it was a teachers college back then. And so then I spent 4 years in Arkadelphia and got a degree. Special ed I was really in physical education. And then I had an opportunity to take some special ed classes at night. Really, I took them because I was at the racetrack during the day on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Truth be told.
Yes. And so then I needed to pick up a few more hours. So I took a couple of night classes, and I was, one of the few undergrads. Most of them were grad students. So when I graduated, I was able to teach special ed and physical education and did kind of both of them. Went back home to New Orleans, taught 3 years in New Orleans. Having special education degree allowed me to work with a pretty large population from Down syndrome all the way to basically a behavior disturbed, what they call emotional disturbed. population. And so it was good. It was in a special school. The whole school had special needs kids. And so then it was like one of those things where, okay, I need to work on my master's. And so then I moved to Lafayette after 3 years in New Orleans.
Which has a really good food scene,
absolutely.
by the way.
I was exposed to a whole different culture because people don't realize, Randy, that Cajun cooking and Creole cooking are two different things. They're both excellent. But when I try to describe it to people, I think of Cajun as more of country cooking. And you raised it, you killed it, you ran over it, you made gumbo, low, slow, long kind of cooking.
Yeah.
When you get to New Orleans, because of the Italian, because of the French, because of the Caribbean influences, we had a whole different thing. And so that's Creole. And you have tomato in gumbo. In New Orleans, you don't in Lafayette.
Okay.
You have tomato in jambalaya. That Italian, they brought the tomatoes. So you have a whole different thing. And this is almost city cooking. So Creole's city, Cajun is country.
Yeah.
And both excellent and really good at, what they do. And so going to Lafayette, I got exposed to people who really knew how to make a gumbo.
Yeah.
And, I taught in Pecan Island. I taught in Abbeville, Louisiana. I taught in Crowley, Louisiana, and retired after 25 years in Acadia Parish. And by that time, I had really gotten involved in cooking.
Yeah.
And, I would do during the summers off, I had a little catering company called A Catered Affair. And I would do, bridal showers and receptions and small gatherings. And that's kind of what I did. So, it was kind of a natural thing to think of. I retired at 48.
That's young.
It's young, but in Louisiana, you could.
Yeah.
If you had 20 years or more, you could retire. So I didn't stick around. I had done really what I wanted to do.
Well, how did you end up in Northwest Arkansas? I mean, I get Henderson College, but how did you end up in Northwest Arkansas?
Okay. So my partner, Carla, is a therapist.
Okay.
And she's from Camden, Arkansas.
Okay.
And it was kind of one of those things where it was either go to New Orleans when I retired and get in business with my brother, who has a restaurant in New Orleans called Smitty's Restaurant and Oyster Bar. He's the youngest boy. I didn't think it was a great idea to go home and take over his restaurant or get into his restaurant. And so, we just started thinking about what we wanted to do. What was the next step? And Arkansas seemed like the place. And then in 1998, I got a Smart Money magazine that said the top 5 places to be for the next 3 decades.
Really?
One of them was Northwest Arkansas.
Really?
Yeah. Atlanta, Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona. Those
I would love to see that article.
Yeah, look it up.
Yeah, Smart Money magazine.
Smart Money magazine.
Interesting.
It was just like where to be. And of course, you think about it, because I retired in 2000. In the late 90s, Walmart was going like gangbusters.
Sure. Yeah.
And your stocks were splitting and dividing, and they were building Sam's Clubs all over.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, it was a hot area. And so, started looking around. Actually, we looked a little bit in Little Rock.
Okay.
Because the river market was just about to blow up. And we learned that if we got into that situation with a restaurant, it was basically 4 walls and a lot of money to invest. And we didn't have a lot of money to invest.
Sure.
So we wanted a turnkey thing. And so we looked. When we came here, we went up to Bentonville. We looked a little bit in Bentonville and then just really kind of settled on where we are now, 1150 North College. It was the old Highway Inn Motel. The spot was available in November. We moved here in July of 2000. And, it was just kind of like it was fate.
Yeah.
And we've been there ever since.
Ever since. Yeah. That's interesting. And, there's something about that building that kind of has a romantic feel to it. It's a little different, right? I don't
know if I'd use the words romantic.
Well, I mean, but
nostalgic for sure.
Nostalgic. Yeah. Yeah. So, but there's just something about it. It's hard to describe, but I would encourage anybody that is listening that hasn't been to Cafe Rue Orleans, but has driven by and seen the sign, you need to stop and either go there for lunch or dinner or brunch on a Sunday, but you will not be disappointed. And it really is a slice of New Orleans right here in Northwest Arkansas. What can you kind of talk maybe about, your inspiration once you actually opened Cafe Rue Orleans? Did you decide, hey, I'm going to create and put out all of the New Orleans normal fare, or I wanted to do something a little different with it?
Well, I mean, that was kind of a year of driving back and forth to Little Rock, writing down every recipe that I knew, every dish that I had ever eaten, and, legal size notebook that was very, very full and still is in a book, the birth of Cafe Rue Orleans.
Okay.
And Carl is very, very organized. And I am not. I'm very ADD. And so I throw out these ideas and she grabs them and she makes them happen.
Right.
And really and truly, she's the one who pretty much put it all down on paper. It was in my head.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what it was going to look like, but I knew what I liked to eat. And so just that year of driving back and forth and trying to find a spot to live and a spot to open a restaurant and start a business on nothing, really. We had saved enough money maybe for like a mid-sized Toyota. We thought we could make the payments on that if it didn't work. So, it was just kind of one of those things. I knew I wanted po' boys because that's what New Orleans is founded on.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, one of the first po' boys to go was a roast beef po' boy because nobody ordered it. We had the meat, we sliced it, we portioned it, we had the gravy. It just never took off. I had one guy across the street when the hospital was open at the time. He was from New Orleans and he was a nurse and he'd get off about 3:30 and twice a week he'd walk across the street and grab a roast beef po' boy. But here, people did not make that connection. Roast beef po' boy is what you want when you go to New Orleans.
Okay.
Now, shrimp's great. Oysters, great.
Right.
Crawfish, great. But that's just sort of what New Orleans people, locals want, which is the first thing I get when I go home.
Okay.
At Parasols. Parasols on Constance is my go-to po' boy.
Okay.
Everybody has one. It's a neighborhood restaurant. So then, moving on, I had to have a muffalata because New Orleans is known for a muffalata. I use Boscoli olive salad made in New Orleans. I use Gambino's French bread with seeds on top in a round bake, and it makes it pretty authentic. Muffalatas don't need mustard or pickles or mayonnaise. It's an olive salad and meat and cheese and bread, and that's it.
That's it.
So then, I had to come up with ideas. Chapatulas, for one, I wanted to honor my mom. So catfish chapatulas was a dish that I created, and it's on the menu. It is the number one dish year after year.
So describe that dish. How do you prepare the catfish?
So we get a catfish fillet, we butterfly it, and we stuff it with our crab cake stuffing. And then we fold it back, smooth it out, we batter it and fry it.
Oh, wow.
And then when it comes out, we top it with a seafood cream sauce that has shrimp and tasso, which we make our own tasso. And it's a smoky pork product, heavily smoked, heavily seasoned. And we put it in the food processor. It goes in that dish. It goes in our gumbo and our red beans to give it that smoky back.
Yeah.
So that's our Pontchartrain sauce is our kind of like go-to sauce. It doesn't mean anything. It's not like a Bernaise.
Yeah.
This is just something I created. And I wanted to keep the menu true to things people would recognize in New Orleans, like Pontchartrain, Chapatula Street, Decatur Street salad, Bourbon Street chicken, so that we kind of kept that theme going. And Cafe Rue. So Rue is two things. R-O-U-X is flour and oil.
Right.
We make a gumbo. And then R-U-E is the French word for street.
Yep.
And so in New Orleans, when you go, you'll see Rue Bourbon, you'll see Rue Orleans, you'll see Rue Royal on the sidewalk in the tile. And so that's where that name came from. So that's why I have a street lamp in my logo. It sort of ties everything in.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think you've done a good job of kind of tying everything in with the food and just kind of the experience. And like I said, I mean, the beignets, second to none. It's as close as you're going to get to Café du Monde as being there, you know.
Yes.
And so I certainly would encourage people to take advantage of that. Talk about a little, so you've survived the financial meltdown of 08, 09.
Oh my God,
and you're still around. You survived the pandemic.
Yeah.
I would love for you just to kind of talk about kind of the challenges and rewards to running a restaurant, especially in a growing area like Northwest Arkansas.
Changing. It's changed. We opened 22 years ago.
I know.
In January.
You've seen everything.
I've seen 100 plus come and go.
Yeah.
And not so much, Randy, that the food wasn't any good. It's usually a management issue.
Yeah.
You know, it's trying to find staff and it's trying to find honest people that's not going to take things from you, that they're going to do a good job and you're going to pay them an honest wage. So running your own business is such a challenge. And once you work for yourself, number one, you'll never work harder for anybody else. You'll never.
No.
Because some days are, long and some weekends are really, really trying. So it would be hard for me to go back to work for anybody else.
Yeah.
Some of the hurdles that I've experienced, you just have to figure out how to make it work. For the first, I would say 12 to 15 years, we had college students that would come in. They needed beer money. They'd wash dishes. They'd wait tables. We've seen a change, of course, since COVID, but a little bit before that, we started seeing kids driving Range Rovers. Go down Fraternity Sorority Row. They have cars that are very, very expensive, which means they come from families that they don't need to work.
Yeah.
I worked all through college, every single day, right?
Yeah.
And so now we have a different kind of generation that some of the people don't need to work and some of them really don't want to work. So staffing's always an issue.
Yeah.
And I have been blessed with a staff that really sticks with me. I mean, I've had people stick with me 8-10 years.
Yeah.
I've had several that have been with me 5 or 6, left for a few years and came back. And so that to me is, I think, one of the blessings and the reasons why we're here 22 years. I don't need somebody to come in that knows how to flip burgers.
Sure.
I just need somebody to come in that's willing to learn because I'm a teacher at heart.
Yeah.
You combine teaching and food, I'm in 150%. I like passing on what I know. And I'm a really good teacher. I know that's one of my gifts, besides being charming and charismatic and sometimes funny.
Yeah.
But that's my thing. And I think I need to share it. Some of the challenges really just take a little bit of persistence and perseverance and try to figure it out.
Yeah.
Some of the fun things, I have been exposed to so many friends, people who were customers for years and years. And then all of a sudden they become friends. They become confidants. It's one of those things that you don't think of when you're going to open a restaurant. You think you're just going to feed people.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to go in on Monday and tighten up all the screws in the chairs. You're not going to have to go in and fix something that's broken. You don't think about that when you get ready to open a restaurant. You're just ready to feed people. And I think some of those things can be challenges and some of those things can be plus. Being part of the community is in my DNA because my mom was very involved in church, grew up Catholic.
Sure.
We could walk to church. That's how close we were.
Yeah.
And we were taught to give back. And I could bore you with stories about my mom giving away a Christmas present that my dad gave her, a coat, to a lady she didn't know in a grocery store because she was outside cold. And so that's the way I was raised. It was always to give back and to be part of. And it served me well. That lesson has been in my heart forever.
Well, and I'm glad you kind of took me into this space because I did want to talk with you about community engagement and kind of how do you see Cafe Rue Orleans playing a role within the community. And it's so funny because I reached out to 2 specific people that I know you, and I wanted to get their thoughts about you. And so the first one is my buddy Nate Walls from Secondhand Smoke Barbecue, who I know you've kind of taken him under your wing somewhat and have kind of helped him out with some things. But he said that Maudie is extraordinarily generous. She supports so many different causes in our community, and she has an authenticity, a kind of charismatic Southern charm that you can feel when she talks to you. She's dope. That's how he ended it. And I actually got a very comparable response from Herbert Boo Buchanan. And he and his wife, Sarah, are doing some amazing things, both here in Northwest Arkansas as well as over in Africa. And I know that they have worked with you on several of their events and initiatives, and you've supported them. I know you supported the Soup Sunday event for several years, and maybe
you won it several years.
You won it for several, yeah. So so you've had your hands in a lot of different activities from a community standpoint. How has that played a role in how you have evolved as not just a chef, but as somebody in the community that has found ways to give back?
I'm very involved in the community, and I believe the community supports me. And maybe, during that time of COVID and that time where the economy crashed, I didn't really suffer.
Yeah.
I usually bloom where I'm planted. And so being able to give back to me is it's just so important. And I serve on several boards. I've been an A&P commissioner for 8 years for the city of Fayetteville. I know what tourist money does.
Yeah.
I know what local money does, because most of the A&P money comes from locals who eat in the restaurants. The hotels would be tourists. I've been on the botanical garden board for 8 years.
That's a beautiful facility.
Oh my God.
Yeah, people don't realize that. You ride down 265 just kind of north of Joyce, and you ride right by it. And you if you don't look really fast, you won't notice it. But if you stop and go in there, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like in a whole nother world. Right. So
I was on the A&P board when the board gave them $500,000 to finish the build.
Okay.
Because they were stalled out.
Yeah.
And I'm real proud of that. I think it was the right decision in the way to move that forward. I'm now serving on Peace at Home board, and it is very needed. I hate to say it, but it is very needed here.
Sure.
So having said that, I feel like when somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to raise some money for fill in the blank, and it touches me, I am going to donate whatever I can. And it might mean a case of chicken to Nate so that he can feed his people. It might mean me actually making, 30 chicken breasts to give away for somebody to raise money. I feel like it's just me giving back because I get so much out of this community. And yes, there is a fringe benefit of advertisement, but to me, it's just about giving back. I do a lot of things now where I'm judging food events.
Yeah.
The Heart Association, Paint the Town Red, the Top Chef. I just did Top Chefs in Rogers for the Rogers Public Library. There are things that I want to be involved in to be part of this community. And I tell people all the time, when you have an event, sometimes you raise funds and sometimes you raise awareness. And that's the biggest thing. We can't always raise enough money for whatever charity we're doing or for whatever event. But raising awareness is just as important, because somebody somewhere is going to go, oh, I didn't know that existed.
Sure.
Oh, I didn't realize we had that in our community.
Yeah.
And so I encourage people, especially, when you've been here in Fayetteville, get on a board, help make decisions to make this community what you think it should be, and to help it continue. And if you can afford it, give away something. Help feed somebody. We have some food insecurities here that sort of go under the radar.
Oh, yeah.
And Nate is bringing them to life.
Yeah, I would say that some of my greatest experiences with food insecurity here in Northwest Arkansas was, standing alongside Nate and helping him deliver food, like at the early parts of the pandemic, and just really awakened my eyes to what's right here in our own backyard. Because you think, oh, well, Walmart, JB Hunt, Tyson, that place is just flowing with milk and honey and cash. And that's not always the case.
No.
It really isn't.
When you peel back the layer of the onion, you get to see really what's going on.
Right.
And, during COVID, that whole year and a half, I did not lose one employee because we got money to keep them, and I passed it on.
Yeah.
And I made sure that they were able to pay their bills. And so once everything settled down and the country started getting back to normal, then my people started looking elsewhere and trying to decide what they wanted to do next.
Right.
But, so many people lost employees, they had to close the doors.
It's tough. It was tough.
And so it was really a trying period for us. And, it's putting your head down, not really thinking a whole lot, but moving, and you have to pivot.
Yeah.
You have to figure it out within a day. When we were told, hey, in March, you can't open your restaurant. Everything shut down. You got to figure it out, and you can't wait too long.
No. Yeah, and I remember very distinctly, I got together with like Jeremy Gothrop. I talked to Matt Cooper at that time. I talked to John Allen from Onyx. And, one of the things that I felt like I could do was, kind of share their stories about what they were doing to pivot in that moment. And I think what I saw here in Northwest Arkansas was the camaraderie that exists even among restaurant owners, right? Where it wasn't so much competition. It was like, how do I help each other? How do I help you keep your doors open? I remember, Hannah Withers was out there constantly. Every day she had a new post on Facebook encouraging people to support our local service industry, because unfortunately, those are some of the folks that are hit the hardest when we had to experience what we experienced with the pandemic.
Right. And, to piggyback on that thought about helping each other out, I feel like in Northwest Arkansas, the chefs really help each other. We're all trying to make a living. We're not getting rich. Yeah. We're just trying to do what we love. Feeding people has a really different tone to it than being an accountant.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Because
nothing against being an accountant. But
it's just that what we do is really a different thing, and we're very passionate about it. And if I have an event in Rogers and I get there and I unload and I see that I haven't brought sterno, I can make a call, and within 5 minutes, I don't have to even go get it. They'll bring it to me.
Yeah.
Chef, where are you? I'll bring it. I'll drop it.
Sure.
And that's how it is. If somebody comes to Fayetteville and says the same thing, we just kind of help each other out. And my brother has a restaurant in New Orleans, and he said, it is amazing because it's cutthroat in New Orleans.
Sure. Because everybody's trying to get that tourist dollar.
Everybody's trying to grab the dollar.
Yeah.
And he said, when I come to Fayetteville, and when he comes to visit, he'll get in my restaurant and he'll cook. He says it's so different. People just are different here. And that's a credit to who we are.
Sure.
And what we want to do.
Yeah, that's exciting. I hear that over and over again. And I was just having a conversation with folks with the Urban Land Institute of Northwest Arkansas. We were having some conversations around what is health and how we address food insecurity here in Northwest Arkansas. And it just seems like, to a man and woman, to a person, everybody wants to lend a hand to the best of their abilities.
Sure.
Right? We're not on the sidelines being a spectator. We're all in. We're like, how do we do this? What do you need? How do I help you? It's like, even with the platform that I've built with this podcast, I mean, we're 260 plus episodes. We've interacted with so many different people, from Bella Vista here to Fayetteville, Eureka Springs over to Siloam. And it's like every chance that we get to share our platform with somebody else that has a great story, we try to do it, because we know that one story can be the difference for somebody here in this area.
Right.
And that's the thing that I really enjoy the most about this podcast, in the same way that you enjoy cooking and sharing your skill set and ability with so many people, because it does make a difference at the end of the day.
When I taught, Randy, every day I really would get up and feel like that if I accomplished making a difference in one person's life, that was a good day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had that mindset. I have it every day that I wake up, that I can make a difference. And it could be as simple as giving somebody the most tasty bite in one bite, which is the catfish chapatulas.
Sure.
Catfish, crab meat, and shrimp, all in one bite. Or telling the person behind me in the line at Walmart, I really like your hair, or I love your shirt. It's simple.
Yeah.
It's little simple things that we have within us to do.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think it's important to me that I do it every day and stay conscious of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's funny, I always talk about like Brene Brown, and she said one of the biggest challenges that we have is sometimes we struggle with seeing the humanity in each other.
Absolutely.
And I think when we take the time to see the humanity in each other, then, a lot of our guard that we put up and a lot of other things that we're able to get past that. Even when there is a place of disagreement, it's hard to look somebody in their eyes and really connect with them and not be able to, have some type of fundamental understanding of who that person is. Because we're all going through the same stuff.
Sure.
It's just, and so I think it's important for us to be reminded of that.
I think we need to be reminded to be kind.
Yeah.
And I've seen it since COVID, and I can't explain it. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Do.
People are they're just mean sometimes, mean-spirited. They're mean to our wait staff because we didn't fill up their glass in a timely fashion. We're very demanding as a society.
Yeah.
And, it's just, I think we just need to treat people with more kindness and quit judging them. Quit judging that homeless person that you see on that corner.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, and hurt people. I always say that. And I think that the reality is that people just need to be reminded of that. There, but by the grace of God go I, because I could be in that situation. Right. And I was talking to somebody the other day about that and about how even over the last few years, even riding on the Greenway, the increase in tents that I'll see in different areas and places. And, and I'm thinking, man, I could be there, a
couple of bad decisions. Yes, absolutely. A couple of paychecks that don't come.
Yeah.
And I live in South Fayetteville off of Cato Springs. And so from the restaurant to home, I pass it every day and I see these guys with signs and just needing stuff. And I really, really struggle to not stop and just open my wallet.
I know.
And I carry around things in my car. I carry around a blanket. I carry around little toiletry things, Ziplocky things, go to a hotel, you get shampoo and soap and stuff like that. And I just carry it around. I never know who I'm going to give it to, but I have it. And I'm more likely to do that.
Yeah.
Is to give something, give away that coat that my mom got for Christmas because someone needed it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I think, we all have to find that creed that we live by that allows us to do what we do on a daily basis. So like I always say, we all have that true north. We just have to follow it. So, and I think it just allows you to just take life and deal with it a little differently. Yes. So, it really does. Well, listen, as we wind up here, two things I want to ask. First of all, how was that experience on the Food Network's supermarket stakeout? First of all, how did that opportunity come about? And what was it like competing in that program?
So I think how it came about was I was selected by the lieutenant governor in Arkansas. I think it was back in 2019 to represent the state of Arkansas in New Orleans for the Great American Seafood Cook-Off.
Okay.
And so when he asked me, I was like, okay, I'm from New Orleans. And he was like, yeah, I know you're from New Orleans. I said, okay. So I go down there, I compete. I didn't win, but I had my brother as my sous chef, and I had probably 40 to 50 friends and relatives that would just cheer their hearts out for me. And so I had a lady come up to me and say, do you have a publicist? Do you have an agent? I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And so that's kind of how it came about, I think, because then she said, I could get you on Food TV. I could, get you some spot. And I was like, I was kind of starstruck in a way. I was like, because you put a microphone in front of me, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I was a teacher, so I can talk.
Yeah.
So then it came up. They recorded the whole thing, and it was on PBS in New Orleans. And I think somebody saw it.
Sure.
So then I start getting these emails from Guys Grocery Games, Chopped. And so it came from Food Network, and they just kept coming in. And I was like, oh my God, what's going on? And then finally, I tried to get on Guys Grocery Games. You have to go through 50 pages of stuff that you sign your life away.
Sure.
And then the dates didn't make. And then all of a sudden a producer called me and said, hey, I'm getting ready to produce a new show. It was Supermarket Stakeout with Alex Guanichelli.
Yeah.
And so I said, cool. And it worked out. They flew me out to Los Angeles. They picked us up from the airport. We went to the hotel, and then we were on set at 5:45 in the morning, and it was a day of filming.
Wow.
It was a bucket list.
Yeah.
Check.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was really happy I didn't get voted off the island the first round, and then the second round, and then the third round, it was just me and Molly. And Molly had competed in Top Chefs on Bravo. 2 seasons. First season got voted off quickly, and second season went deep. So it was just her and I, and it was a long day of filming. It was work. It was fun at times, but it was tough being on a parking lot in California all day standing, cooking. And then if you've seen the show, I don't run real fast. I have 2 knee replacements. And so I'm like, hey, I'm just going to make it my own.
Sure.
So I didn't take off like a speeding bullet, but I got there and I did what I needed to do. I was disappointed I didn't win simply because I thought I had the better dish. And what you don't see as a viewer is what conversations went on when we were there.
Yeah.
It took a long time to decide the winner.
Interesting.
And you could hear Duff and Christian Petroni. They were the judges they were fantastic. You could see them. They were having a hard time. They went back and forth, and one wanted me, the other wanted Molly. It went back and forth and back and forth. And we're just standing there.
Oh, man.
With our hands behind our backs, just waiting. And producers are all over, cameramen are all over. And then finally, when they announced it and I hadn't won, it was okay.
Yeah.
But it was a dream of a lifetime. It came true. Still get, this day, emails to come back on. But I'm 71. I'm like, I've done that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's let somebody else do it. And it was really good. And I can tell you that every time a new season of Supermarket Stakeout, I think they're on season 6 now. Mm-hmm. I was on number 1, the first episode. We get business in the cafe like crazy.
Interesting.
I saw you on TV last night.
Yeah.
So,
that's the power of television. So,
and, here's the thing, too. After, you film all day and the next day you come back, the producer's sitting on the floor with your show and asking you questions. That's when they do the interview. Mm-hmm. They said, who are you? I said, I'm Maudie Schmitt. I was born and raised in New Orleans. I live in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Yeah.
I have a restaurant, Cafe New Orleans, home of the Razorbacks, even though I'm a LSU Tiger fan. Yeah. I went on about who I was. When they come to the show, they say, hi, I'm Maudie Schmitt. I was born and raised in New Orleans.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
They don't say anything about Fayetteville. They don't. Of course, I didn't think they would plug my restaurant. But, it's one of those things and people say, why didn't you say anything about Fayetteville? It's like
I did, but they ended up on a cutting room floor. Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I like about these long form podcasts that I get to do is I can kind of fit a lot of stuff in because typically that's all for TV. It's just the way that it is. So the goal is always to be able to share as much, peel back the onion, as you said earlier, of the layers of our lives so that we can have a greater explanation. So the last question that I have for you is simply this. What advice would you give to any aspiring chefs and or restaurateurs, not just here locally, but just let's say some people that listen to this from around the country, but just in general, what would you say to them in the current climate that we're in when it comes time to start a business and to run a business efficiently? And I'm a big fan of Kitchen Nightmares with Chef Gordon Ramsay. I watch all of those and you see all the mistakes that are made in the restaurant industry. And they're like landmines everywhere when starting and running a restaurant, especially. What advice would you give to anyone that currently wants to or has a restaurant right now?
So my first thought when you said that is don't do it.
Okay.
That's my first thought.
Sure.
I have 2 or 3 places here in town that I was consulting on ahead of time and kind of told them, look, it's not the right time. Mm-hmm. And they close.
Yeah.
So I would say follow your passion and find out if that community where you want to open needs your restaurant or needs your business.
Yeah.
Because if they got 18 Thai restaurants in a 3-mile radius, they don't need another Thai restaurant. No. And they can be anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
So find out if there's a need for what you have. And then the other thing I would say is be authentic. You can't just visit New Orleans on vacation and decide that you want to open a New Orleans restaurant in Des Moines, Iowa. You can't do it. You're not going to be open that long. Be authentic.
Yeah.
If you're going to put out a product, make sure that it comes from the heart. My recipes come from my experience growing up in New Orleans, from my grandma, my aunt, my dad, my mom. And so those are recipes that have history with me. Yeah. And so that's what I serve. I didn't grow up eating blackened redfish. Paul Prudhomme burnt some redfish one day in butter, and it became a thing. In New Orleans, we didn't grow up eating blackened anything.
Yeah.
Grilled, char broiled, things like that. So be authentic in what you want to put out. And then the third thing is get involved in the community. Before we opened the doors in January, there was an event in Springdale, and they were raising money for the Heart Association. And the restaurant wasn't even open, and I made gumbo, and I wanted to be in because I wanted people to taste it and go, well, where's your restaurant? Well, it's not open yet, but it will be.
Yeah.
So I got involved very early, giving away food because I really believed I could do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you said it earlier, bloom where you're planted.
Yes.
And you have to do that. And that's like some of the best advice that I ever got from my grandfather. What, you take the time to give to a city, it will ultimately give back to you, or city or location or region or whatever. But
your community,
yeah, exactly.
Right. So. And just because you think you make the best lasagna in town doesn't mean you need to open an Italian restaurant.
Yes, say that again for the people in the back.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, stay home. I have lots of friends who do great barbecue, not grill, great barbecue. Nate's one of them, and he can make a living doing it. Jordan Wright can make a living at Wright's doing it. Yeah. They have the thing. But not everybody who makes a great dish should open a restaurant.
That's true. Yeah. Well,
it's hard.
It is hard. It is very hard work and thankless at a lot of times too, as well. So, which is why you have to be surrounded with people that continue to encourage you. And certainly I know you have that with the chef community that exists here in Northwest Arkansas. Yes. As well as your partner, as well as your employees, your family members / staff folks. And I mean, you need that. Without that, I mean, you can't do it. It's just hard.
It's hard.
It's really hard. So, wow. Chef Maudie, if anybody listening to this episode wants to come to Cafe Rue Orleans, you guys are open Tuesday through Sunday. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And it's 11. We open at 11, Tuesday through Saturday, and we close at 8.
Okay.
And then Sunday we do brunch from 10:30 to 2.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And the brunch is excellent.
Well, the brunch is nothing like you'll find in Northwest Arkansas. We don't do eggs over easy and crispy bacon.
Right.
Go to Waffle House, go to somewhere else to get that. We do authentic New Orleans dishes and Lafayette dishes that you can't find anywhere else.
Yeah. So, I encourage you to definitely check out and see Cafe Rue Orleans for yourself. And I mean, just, Chef Maudie's hospitality and the employees that she has there, they're absolutely fabulous. So if you are a fan of the Big Easy and you love the food from New Orleans, you could do a lot worse by not heading over to Cafe Rue Orleans. So you definitely got to check it out. So Chef Maudie Schmitt, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
I'm humbled.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, folks, there you have it. Another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember, our episodes air just about every Tuesday as well on Ozarks at Large. So Kyle typically takes a segment of an episode just like this one we just did with Chef Maudie, and they'll play it the next day after this comes out. Remember, our episodes come out every Monday, rain or shine. You can find us on every major podcasting platform. And of course, the podcast, we continue to try to put out this type of really high quality content for you on a regular basis. If you know someone or know an organization whose story needs to be told on this podcast, please reach out to us. hello@IamNorthwestArkansas.com. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we'll see you back here next week for another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.